Friends, you may be seated.
Service this morning will be conducted by Rabbi Michael Siegel, Rabbi George Gold of Anshe Emet Synagogue, and Rabbi David Taktil of Chabad Center for Jewish Life. We're going to begin the service with military honors.
As we gather today to pay tribute and celebrate the memory of Phil Goldstick, we begin with Psalms. And in this way, we celebrate his life through the words of the tradition. We have a number of people who will help us remember Phil today. I'm honored to call upon Rabbi David Taktil, the Executive Director of the Chabad Campus for Jewish Living at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, to read a psalm.
King David always brings us comfort. When we read the Psalms, we can apply it to so many situations in life. How much more so when I think of some of the Psalms, I think of Phil. Psalm 1, Ashria ish asher lo halach ba'atzas reshayim, v'derech hatayim lo amad, v'moshev leitzim lo yashav, ki im b'seras adinei cheftzai, v'serasa yega yemen v'layla. V'haya ke'et shasel al palgei mayim, asher piryo yite v'itei, v'alei lo yiba, v'chalasha yasa yatzliach. Lo chen harashayim, ki im kemoitz asher tetevenu ruach, aken lo yakum roshem v'mishvach hatayim b'adas tzadikim, ki yedei adinei derech tzadikim, v'derech v'sharim torved. Happy is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of the sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scorners, but whose delight is in the Torah of the Lord, and his Lord he meditates day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth its fruit in season. Its leaves also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. The wicked are not so, but they are like chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked shall not stand in judgment, nor the sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. I think King David, when he wrote this psalm many years ago, had in mind Phil being that tree on the side of the water, which will flourish for many generations to come.
We gather this day to fulfill a mitzvah, the mitzvah of livia. That is to escort a person, to walk with them on their final journey. And as I offer this idea to you, I'm struck by how Phil walked with us. I look around this room and I know that Phil Goldstick was there with you. And if there was an issue in your life, Phil would not only listen to you, he would be thinking about how he could support you. So today we gather to repay the favor, to walk with him, to walk with his memory on this day. And it's with that in mind that we turn to the 23rd Psalm. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binodeshi yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi shovev, yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech begates al mavet, lo irara ki atai madi. Shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni, Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sodarai. Tishanta v'shemen roshi kosir vaya. Ach tov v'chesed yedufuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti b'veit Adonai la'orech yamim. Please join me as we look to the inner page of your booklets and we read responsively, paragraph by paragraph. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. On this day, as we walk in the pathway of King David through the valley of the shadow, all of us are walking with memories of Phil. Some way that he touched your life. Some way that he uplifted you on life's journey. And so as we escort Phil, we're also walking with his memory, but it is his family that bears the weight of this memory most soundly. So on this day, we remember Beverly, a true companion in life for Phil, and to Gail, and to her Harry. We express our deepest sympathies and prayers for your comfort, and to Karen and her Alan. We pray for your comfort in these difficult days. And we are thinking also of Craig. May his memory be for a blessing. And to grandchildren, to you, Marissa, to you, Brad. Pray that you will know comfort in these difficult days. And to you, Alana, we pray for your comfort. To William as well. And to the great-grandchildren, to Chaya, to Chana, to Mendel, to Shana, and to a beloved brother, to Alan. We pray for your comfort on this difficult day. We have gathered to remember a truly remarkable man, Phil Goldstick. And in many ways, Phil was larger than life. I never had an encounter with Phil when I didn't feel uplifted, or I wasn't inspired on some level, when I didn't learn something new, when I didn't smile. Phil was, as I'm sure you'll agree, remarkable that way. He was on the Mensa level of emotional intelligence. Phil was a true believer in PMA, positive mental attitude. And for him, and for those who had the privilege of being part of his circle, it made all the difference. Sometimes timing is everything. There's something appropriate about burying a Jewish member of the 1952 champion University of Illinois Rose Bowl team on Super Bowl Sunday. We gather on an American Yom Tov of sorts to remember Phil. It's also appropriate that in the days leading to this funeral, the Jewish people gathered yesterday morning for Shabbat Shirah, the Sabbath of song, the day in which we read the climactic moment when Pharaoh's armies are closing in on the Israelites at the shore of the Sea of Reeds. And the sea splits open as Moses stands with his staff above the waters. And the people walk through on dry land, and then the waters come crashing down on Pharaoh and his army. And after witnessing this moment when God acted in history, the people began to sing, led by Moses, Az Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael tashira hazot ladonai. Then Moses and Israel sang this song to the Lord. Leading up to this funeral, the Jewish people gathered in song, and it made me think that this was a tribute to Phil because his life was a song of sorts, a beautiful song of wonder, of purpose, of love of family, of love of people, of pride in his Jewish identity and in the state of Israel. It was a song that centered on that indomitable spirit that Phil possessed to make a difference. Whatever he did, he sought to make a difference. Phil Goldstick was animated by hit lahavut, Hebrew word that means much more than passion. It's a burning desire within you. And so many in this room, so many that we will never know, have been touched by that warm and wonderful flame that burned within Phil. Here's something that Pat Phillips, one of Phil's devoted caretakers, wrote about Phil. And I want to also acknowledge Phil's wonderful caretakers. Mark Sue as well. Pat wrote to the family, Mr. Goldstick was a fulfilled man. He would always build others up. The years that I spent with him was the most formative and the most growth that I had experienced in my entire life. He had an awesome effect on my life and many others. He would say to me, don't get caught up in the past, focusing on regret because you can't move forward. He was very motivational without even trying. His desire to tackle everyday life no matter what it was. His tenacity, his self-motivation, his diligence, and his overall desire to maintain a positive mental attitude. He opened my eyes to so many new experiences that I otherwise would have never experienced. Mr. Goldstick has made an incredible impact on my life. Thank you, Phillip C. Goldstick, for taking me on this incredible journey. Powerful words. But let me remind you that Mr. Phillip's job was to take care of Phil. And take note of the fact that Phil was also taking care of him. That was the man. I also want to mention Corello Tumbaco. Cirella worked for a number of years with Marissa, and she and her daughter, Saralitz, and if I mispronounce that, forgive me, became part of the larger family. I was talking to Saralitz before the funeral, and they noted that Phil and Beverly became surrogate parents for her and have had a powerful effect on her life now that she is in university. And there are so many examples of that hit lahavut, that wonderful burning soul that wanted to help, to do what he could do to make a difference. So on this day after Shabbat Shirah, we gather to recall and celebrate that remarkable Shirah of Phil Goldstick. Az Yashir Fishel. So Phil sang. His beginnings were modest. Phil and his brother Alan, they grew up in a small apartment above their parents' millinery store. Phil learned from his parents the power of mishpacha. Mishpacha is the word that we use for family that goes well beyond our genetic connections, our biological relationships. Mishpacha is a word that denotes responsibility. It says, I will be there for you because you're a member of my family. And that is a lesson that Phil learned well. He felt this deep and abiding responsibility. And throughout his life, he was there for his brother Alan in so many different ways. In remarkable ways, I should say. Phil was a student athlete, a football player, and a wrestler. In high school, he won a scholarship to the University of Illinois. And anyone who ever sat in Phil's home would be made immediately aware that Phil's favorite colors were orange and blue. That's right. And that Phil was on that famous Rose Bowl team. And that was the second greatest victory of his life. The first was winning the hand of Beverly. Beverly Kramer, as she was called. For Phil, it was love at first sight. And appropriately, Phil stood outside of her residence and serenaded her. The Shirah, the song of the man. And the two shared a true Shir Ahava, song of love, throughout their 66 years of marriage. They were the ultimate team, supporting each other in every way. And I want to say, and I'm saying things that you already know, that it was remarkable to be with them. Their love, their respect for one another, their good humor was palpable. It wasn't always easy. They lost a young son, Craig, to Tay-Sachs at the age of 4. a tragedy that could tear a marriage apart. Not Phil and Beverly. They found a way to support each other. They found a way to come closer together. They together weathered the tragedy by gaining strength from one another. And the two traveled the world together. They stood strong together for causes that they believed in, especially those that concern the University of Illinois, as we will hear from others today. Phil graduated from DePaul Law School, and he was blessed with an unparalleled desire to succeed. He had a drive like no other. He and his partner opened their law office across the street from the police station, so there were never-ending opportunities for legal counsel. Now, Phil was a gifted lawyer. He was a man of great integrity. But that which was at the heart of so much of his success was his ability with people. He truly loved people. And long before the term networking was invented, Phil Goldstick was teaching a master class on the subject. That was one of the things that drew Phil to golf. Really one of his great passions. Aside from the strategy and skill of the game, Phil loved a sport where you hit the ball part of the time, but you schmooze the rest of the time. And by the way, Phil Goldstick hit 8 holes in one during the course of his life. In his early days as a lawyer, Phil knew everyone, and everyone knew Phil and respected him. Among those who got to know him was Mayor Daley, who asked Phil to run for state senate. And it's important to know Phil's motivation. It wasn't the power of the office that drove him. It was giving back. Phil was a proud American. He had achieved Eagle Scout status as a boy, the Order of the Arrow, to be clear. And in wartime, he served his country stateside during the Korean War. Serving in the Illinois Senate was another way to make a difference and give to a country that he loved. It will surprise no one here that Phil was remarkably successful in all of his endeavors. He built a successful practice that included real estate, corporate law. He became a broker and continued to give back by creating an opportunity for public employees to benefit from tax-sheltered annuities. And eventually, he opened G Equity and took great pride in the fact that he had the opportunity to work side by side with Gail. As she reminded me, Phil was the rainmaker in the firm. There was a remarkable intensity about the man. His caring was remarkable. But of all the successes in his life, the greatest was his family. Such pride. Phil never missed an opportunity to speak about them, whether it was Karen or Gail, Lon or Brad, the whole family, Marissa. They spoke of his presence. Phil was just always there. A beacon of strength, a compass in the most challenging of times. If there was a problem, Phil was bound and determined to find a solution. This was never more evident than his relationship with Marissa, who lives with Rett syndrome. Phil created the most special bond with her, and gets right in front of her. While she may be nonverbal, the two communicate on the most profound of levels. But Beverly and Phil wanted to make a difference for others with communications disorders in honor of their granddaughter, and they supported a scholarship. They supported scholarship at the College of the University of Illinois. The program completed its 20th year in 2024. Beverly's passing left a chasm in Phil's life. He often dreamed of Beverly and would sometimes speak to her. Phil, being Phil, thought of ways to honor her memory. We'll hear from Rabbi Taktil and Rabbi Chaikin Gould about some of these efforts. Phil was meticulous in creating programs that spoke of her love of education that would benefit others. After Beverly died, Phil never took off his wedding ring. The first time it came off was after he died in the hospital. Let us take comfort in knowing that he no longer needs to wear it, because from this day forward, for all of eternity, he will be joined again with Beverly. Just as they were in life, they will be together for all time. I imagine that when they see each other today, that Phil will serenade her as he did more than 70 years ago. And just as the song of his impact on so many people was part of their lives, it will continue beyond the grave. His dugma, his example for his grandchildren, for his great-grandchildren. Our rabbis taught that the song that Moses sang so long ago will continue to be sung long after his death. So too it will be for Phil Goldstick. Az Yashir Phillip C. Phil, you sang a remarkable song. Your life was a beautiful song of love and giving. We know that that song will continue through those who knew and loved you. May you rest b'shalom. May you rest in peace. And to that we can all say, Amen. It's my honor to call on Rabbi Taktil.
It's kind of surreal to stand there today as you remember a dear friend. In addition to all the things that we've heard thus far and we will hear today, I reflect on a personal relationship, many hours of conversation, and I'll try to share some of the conversations and ideas that we could take away in our lives here today. We remember Phillip C. ben Yaakov Shmuel, Philip Goldstick, who passed away on the 7th of Shvat. Only Phil, who's a number guy, could pass away on 2525, February 5th, 25. It's actually interesting, as Rabbi Siegel noted, when we were speaking on the phone last week and trying to figure out what's the soonest we could do this funeral, and the question came up, Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday. I know with the students on campus, they've been up really early this morning, pre-gaming, getting ready. And the family was like, Super Bowl Sunday, could we? It's like the Yom Kippur of America, right? But we quickly came to the realization a Jewish Illini football player, no better day than today to remember him and to bring him on his journey on Super Bowl Sunday. To be honest, I had many conversations this Shabbat with students on campus about Phil. Many times people ask me, how old was the person who passed away? Trying to say, if someone's older, at least they had a good life. But the truth is, it's always too soon for a loved one. It's always too soon for a loved one. It's hard and painful to reflect. It's hard and painful to be here today. Yet we're here, because that's the journey of life. Personally, Phil was a mentor. He was a person I could speak to about anything. And he was a real partner in all that we did at Illini Chabad. We spent so many hours on the phone, so many hours in person, so many celebrations. I was speaking to my wife this morning as I left from Champaign. And I was like, sometimes when you have a funeral, you know the person who passed away, you know part of the family. It's very rare to know every piece of the family, every person, every child, every cousin, every grandchild. Phil and Beverly really brought me to get to know the special Goldstick family. And I'm going to attempt to reflect on some things that I learned. I still recall the first official conversation I had with Phil. About 18 years ago, a mutual friend of ours, Harvey Saltzman, father of Bonnie Dayan, blessed memory, he said, Rabbi, you should reach out to a good friend, a real Illini who loves Judaism, loves Illinois, Phil Goldstick. You met him informally. We met him at Bonnie's passing, but he said, you should call him. Me being a new rabbi at campus, young, only out for a few years, was quite nervous to pick up the phone and call this big alum. But there I was, sitting at the desk. I still remember where I was at that moment. I dialed his number, and from the moment he picked up the phone, he made sure we were comfortable, at ease. What could I do to help you? What could I do to help the students? And thus began an 18-year friendship. Because that was Phil. He was always concerned for other people. Always concerned to raise leaders. I met Phil, and thereafter Beverly, many times after that. They would come by Chabad. I would come up here. Thereafter, we met Gail and Harry, Karen and Alan, the children, the grandchildren, Marissa and Brad and Alana. When I watched Phil and Beverly come by Chabad, I still remember they always had this tradition to come pre-football games and post-football games. They would stop by. Now, to be honest with you, most football games happen, while they played, I prayed, Shabbat morning. But Phil would always come in, because the games usually start. Illini is usually not doing so well, so we got the worst slot in the games, like 11 a.m. So he'd come like pregame, and I'll be reading the Torah service, but he sent the message that I should come out, because he wanted to talk. And that's what happened, pregame, postgame, then came basketball games. He had to always talk. I always wanted to be part of it, but one of the things he always loved talking about was his family. Family was everything to Phil. I cannot begin to tell you the endless hours of deep conversations I had with Phil about every one of you. Children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, the step-grandchildren. So many conversations, how we cared, but there was one common denominator that Phil always wanted to know. I want to do the right thing as a grandfather. What's the best thing to do in this situation? How do I get the message without being offensive? How do I make sure this is done right? Never about him, but about him doing the right thing for his children and grandchildren. He loved you all so dearly. I'm sure you know that, but I want to remind you that. He loved you. He cared about you. He'll do anything for you. When the great-grandchildren came along, I think that gave him another lease on life. I think the excitement of seeing your children, Alana, was something he shared about with a sparkle in his eye. There's a picture that I just found that I sent to you, the excitement that he saw, Chaya, when you came down to the building dedication last year. He was just so happy that another generation is seeing his Illini, Jewish Illini community, and how he can inspire them to be proud of who they are. To Phil, every one of his children's, grandchildren, and descendants' interest became his interest. Their successes were his success. Their worries were his worries. He was so proud of Marissa. Phil would show me paintings that were made. Every single breakthrough that Marissa made, Phil spoke so glowingly about. It was just fascinating. Alana and Brad, your grandfather's pride in you was so, he was so proud of it. Their accomplishments, you went to college. I'm sorry you didn't come to Illinois. Not everybody gets in. But it's okay. You're still wearing Illinois today. It's good. Yeah, my wife told me it's okay not to wear black tie today because Phil went orange. But he was proud of you. You went through college, when you graduated, what you did, what your first jobs were, where you went, and who you were becoming. I remember, Alana, your grandfather shared with me how you have an unbelievable ability to handle challenge with grace, your passion to get things done. And he shared about you, Brad, how you had such a determination, such a drive in everything you pursued. For his family, it was his life. That was the most important thing. And when Phil spoke about his dear son, Craig, he would pull a picture. I'll be in the apartment. I'll take a picture out of Craig. And you could see a father who loved the child. You could see a father who still felt the pain of losing a child. It was always in his heart. He never lost that love. But in turn, Phil got such love from each and every one of you. Gail and Karen, Marissa, Brad, Alana. You gave your grandfather, your father, such love. He felt love. He felt cared. He felt protected, like he was so deserving. And I wanted to share with you, Gail and Karen, that your dedication to your father is so commendable. Your commitment. You have the Goldstick problem, as I shared with you earlier, that you don't know how to focus on yourself. You're busy focusing on them. Your father and your mother were so blessed. Your care and concern. I mean, this week you're calling me from Arizona, updates in the hospital, making sure this is taken care of, that's taken care of. I believe that gave him the long life that he had, the care and the love that you gave him, and you'll forever be blessed for that. I just want to circle back to Beverly a little bit because, as Rabbi Siegel noted, Phil and Beverly were like a young couple, early in love. Not like freshmen, because, then it's not so real. Like the upperclassmen when they start getting serious about their relationships, When Beverly got ill, Phil, personally, was affected. He would call often. He would ask me to visit more. I remember we stood around in the hospital. He wanted everything for Beverly. It was so important to her. After she passed away, he wanted to memorialize her. I remember every time I spoke to Phil, and you would mention Beverly, he would cry. Like as if it was the day she passed away. I remember after she passed away, he would call me and run ideas by me. I want to do things in her memory. What do you think we should do? He started the program at Keshet, the curriculum program at Anshe Emet, and so many others. He wanted to know, do you think this fits Beverly's personality? Beverly loved education, So everything, what would Beverly want? How would Beverly do it? So much so, it sounds ironic, but Phil told me many times that he wants his funeral to be exactly like Beverly's funeral. The people that spoke by Beverly's funeral should speak by his funeral. When Karen and Gail called me up and said, any directives from my father? I said, I could tell you very clearly. He didn't speak about death a lot, but he was clear what he wanted his funeral to look like. It's fascinating. When Phil and Beverly started at Chabad, the Tech Innovation Lounge, which I'll get to a little bit more later, but he asked me after Beverly passed away if we could rename it in memory of Beverly. And I remember in our old building, the family, we came down and we made a whole dedication, put a new sign up, Beverly Goldstick. When we got the new building, Phil came down one post-game with a friend. We just bought the building, and he said, Rabbi, I want to choose the best room in the house for Beverly. And he literally, I showed him one, he's like, no, this is not a good room. No. And he chose the most prized room in the building. He says, this reflects Beverly. And for those of us that were there that day that we dedicated the room, he wanted a beautiful portrait of her to hang. Brad had a great idea. We're going to put a picture of Phil right beside Beverly. But that's what Phil wanted. His love extended in life and in afterlife. It's interesting to note, sometimes when someone passes away, you learn a lot about them after they pass away. But Phil happened to have many conversations about his lifetime, about growing up. He would always share with me, as Rabbi Siegel noted, he grew up in not an easy life. He would always tell me, Rabbi, I didn't have it easy growing up. I know what it's like to have a hard time. But from growing up at a young age, he always grew up with the idea of working hard, you will succeed. Working hard, you will succeed. And that's what he did. Going to University of Illinois, joining a frat with Jewish men, and of course, as noted, playing on the football team. It's interesting to note that I was looking this up. I don't know if there's ever a Jewish Illini that played in a Rose Bowl. It's kind of cool. Although I have to check, did we win that year? I think not. I'm not sure. I have to double check. But Phil won because till today, Phil always walked into Chabad as the Jewish Illini football player. But that wasn't enough. Graduates, served as a first lieutenant in the Army. After that, going back to college to get another degree in law. After that, serving in the House. And I have to tell you, I was in touch with members of the Jewish caucus and shared with them on last week about a Jewish member of the Illinois House just passed away, and they're actually putting together a special proclamation in memory of your dear father. They hoped they had it ready for today, but it was not. Phil invested in special ed. We heard about the Rett syndrome research, special needs organizations, and more. Phil was especially touched by his alma mater, University of Illinois. I think he was the longest serving member on the foundation board. I don't know if there's such a thing. Maybe Chancellor Herman could correct me if you could be as many years as he was, but he just never left. Phil was proud of Israel, fiercely proud of Jewish life and Israel. He stood tall, he stood proud, and he was extremely vocal about it. He had no problem calling me up, especially when he was in Arizona and there was different time zone, any hour. If he heard an update in life or from Dr. Herman, he right away wanted to make sure, what are the students doing? And if there was a problem, he would call the university, he would call the president, he would call the chancellor. Phil Goldstick's on the phone. This better be fixed. That was Phil. He cared. He cared for the college student that he'll never meet. He cared for the people that were in need, and he cared about our future. Phil, as we heard, was a great networker, and personally for me, that was great. As the new kid on the block, he introduced me to a lot of people. I think now it's okay to say the cell phone numbers of presidents, chancellors, athletic directors. Phil always gave it to me. I hope he's not upset that I'm telling anybody now, but I think it's okay. Because he wanted me to call them and be in touch. Phil would call me up and say, Rabbi, there's a foundation meeting, you got to come. I was probably the only guy there that was not a donor, but Phil wanted to parade me around. This is the rabbi, Jews at Illinois are proud, we're here. That was Phil. He was very, very proud of it, and whatever he did all the way. I have to tell you, though, even though he did it all the way, Phil was not an easy man to convince. He wanted the facts. He wanted the proof. He wanted to know what's going to work. Phil used to tell me many ideas, but two big ideas that I've been thinking a lot about. Whether it was talking about how well the Illini are going to win, or whether it's talking about a university administrator. He would always tell me, they're not using critical thinking. Or they are using critical thinking. And whether it was just about a touchdown, or whether it was about a big issue like BDS. He would always say, the problem with this person is they're not critically thinking. Or the great thing about this person, they are critical thinking. David, we have to share with people critical thinking. Another thing Phil would like to say a lot is, let's cut the BS. I don't like it. You know what it says in Missouri plates? Show me state. Show me. We talk about so many different things in life. He says, David, we need to see show me attitudes. No talk, action. That's what he was. He was a man of action. Every product, every idea, every something. Which brings me back to circle back to the Tech Innovation Lounge that we started at Chabad. Phil had this idea with Beverly that we have to bring students together to innovate. And as a proud Jew and a proud Illini, he wanted to bring a place to innovate within the Jewish life. He said, can we create this space where students could come, think of new ideas, share them, and grow with them. And it was important to him that everyone should feel comfortable coming to the Jewish space. And that's what he created in our old center. It was a small room. And in the new building, it grew. A space where people could come together. A place that people could learn, a place that people could grow. Every time I would send him a picture from the Goldstick Tech Innovation Lounge, he would get happy. Whether it was a class, all our classes take place in that room. As I shared with the children, at our Chabad, Goldstick is a verb. We're going to meet in Goldstick. The class in Goldstick. It's kind of funny. I told this to Phil a few weeks ago. He had a good laugh. But that's the reality, because the students, all the meetings happen in the front room. Again, remember, he chose prime real estate in the building. But most importantly, everybody wants to connect. And when you walk into that room, there's a big picture of Beverly, and people ask me, who's that woman? There's a picture of Phil. They say, who's this person? And I explain, this is somebody who's in Chicago who loves you. So much so that this fall, Phil called me up, and he said, Rabbi, it's 2024. When we built the tech lounge, students then, you had to give them computers, you had to give them, today everyone has a laptop. Different reality. We have to update the lounge to have people could collaborate in person and on Zoom with all the update, like a whole 2024 update of the whole lounge. I said, Phil, I'm working on it. I'm getting you a quote. I'm still working on it now. But that's what he wanted. Didn't want it to build something 10 years ago and it stays. He's update, update, update. But that's what he was. Every project, everything that he did, do it all the way. Most people, when they get older, they slow down. They want to take time for the family. We heard earlier how Phil traveled the world. I think he did that more when he was younger, because ever since I know him, the only place I heard him traveling to was Arizona, and I think he went to Pearl Harbor. Was that? No, he went to see something. Maybe it was in Arizona. He barely heard of traveling the world when he got older. He was traveling to Illinois. As I was driving up the highway this morning, great empty highways, I was thinking, how many times does Phil take this highway up and down? But he got older, he actually got more involved in the community. I'm more involved in the community. I still remember that was in 2012, and I was sitting with Richard Herman and Larry Gerber and others that are with us, and we were thinking about who could be recognized for 10 years of Illini Chabad. Who was somebody that epitomizes Jewish and Illini? And who was someone to be willing to put his name on the new kid on the block? And the name came up, let's call Phil and Beverly. And I was like, why would Phil do it? Phil used to tell me many times, Rabbi, I'm not into the kavod. I'm not into the honor. Don't worry about giving me honor. Don't worry. But when Richard called him up, he immediately said yeah. Not only he said yes, he pounded the phones. He brought more. That was a paradigm shift. That was a pivot moment in Illini Chabad's history, where he brought a slew of alumni involved who are still involved until today. He put us in a serious way on the map. And that night, many of you were there. We had 250 people came together, and that was 13 years ago, and that was just the beginning. Everything he did all the way. Everything he did top notch. And everything he did with love. We could speak so much more, but there are many more that will share thoughts. But I just want to close with some parting thoughts, parting words, that Phil is the kind of guy I thought will never die. I thought he'll never pass away. Phil is the kind of guy that till his last moments, till the night before, he just came home from the hospital. On Tuesday night, he hosted guests in his house. That's not normal. That's seriously not normal. It was not even a big deal. It was like, I was speaking to Mark, so yeah, last night we had guests. I spoke to the dean that spent dinner with Phil the night before, and she told me, I can't believe a few hours later he passed away. We literally were sitting last night talking about him and Beverly and his trips around the world with her. But that was Phil. He never stopped, always worrying about others until his last moments. And his love for others is the love to him. I could tell you the amount of phone calls, text messages, emails I've received from people, alumni, university administrators, people in the Jewish Illini community, athletics, so many people that I never even knew were connected to Phil. I was standing at a basketball game last week, and the dean of education came over to me and said, how's Phil? Sunday night. He just touched so many people, and as I listened to people talk, I'm realizing that everyone felt like they had deepest conversations with him, because that was Phil. He made everyone feel good, and everyone loved him back. You know, we heard before about the caretakers. I was speaking to Mark Sue, and she was sharing with me. We spoke a few times since the untimely passing of Phil, and you shared with me how Mr. G, as you like calling him, treated you like a father. And if it's okay to quote, you shared with me like the father you never had. He never treated you like an employee. I do want to tell you that you treated him with such reverence and honor. I've seen it up close. And for that, you'll always be blessed. And that extends to the entire extended family that cared for Phil and Beverly. Marissa, we heard about like maybe Sorella, who was treated like a daughter of Pat Phillips, the weekend caregiver for Beverly and later for Phil. Everyone shared similar sentiments, that they were like family. And each of you caregivers, you should be blessed for many years for the kindness that you have given them. Phil, I'll miss our talks. I'll miss our commentary on life. I'll miss you. All Shabbat I was thinking about it. But Phil, I commit to continuing everything you empowered me to do. All that was dear to you, I hope we could continue making you proud. We won't stop. We will continue, we will double, we will grow, and we will continue to impact. I do have to say, in closing, that one of the things Phil asked me a lot is, what is my legacy going to be? Phil used to tell me, when I die, what are people going to remember me for? He told me this quite a few times. And he said it's one of the things, actually, that he believes drove him in life. What do I want to be remembered for? And he told me he would share this with others as he would speak. What do you want to be remembered for? Phil, I can tell you, you'll be remembered for a lot. You'll be remembered for the thousands of lives you impact, your family you've raised, and the impact that will continue to grow to so many more. A proud Jew, a proud Illini, and everything that you do will live on. The family commits to continue living like you as proud Jews, continuing everything that you and Beverly began. They will continue what you started. They would emulate all you have shown. The story told about a caterpillar that goes into a cocoon and it comes out as a butterfly. The million-dollar question is the caterpillar the butterfly? Or is it a different creation? Well, we all know the caterpillar went through a metamorphosis and comes out of the butterfly. Life in this world, we're caterpillars. Death is the cocoon. The soul lives on as a butterfly. This idea is from Jewish tradition that we're taught life does not end when someone passes, it continues on in another way. As we know, death in Judaism is not an end of a life, but a culmination of one's accomplishments in life. David HaMelech, King David, wrote in Psalm 49, "Do not fear when a man grows rich, when the glory of his house is increased, for when he dies, he will take nothing. His glory will not descend after him, for he alone praised himself in his lifetime, but all will praise him if you better yourself." Although Phil won't be with us in a physical sense, Phil will live on. We ask Phil to go up to heaven, right side Beverly and Craig, and be a gutta better, to beseech God for health and happiness for the family. Only goodness and challenges should go away. Only blessings, health, and happiness for all, and celebrations to come now and in the future. And we all say, Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi. We call upon by George Shaken Gould of the Anshe Emet Synagogue to share some thoughts about the tribute that was made at Anshe Emet in Beverly's name.
The Talmud teaches, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Talmidei Chachamim, Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. Rabbi Elazar said, in the name of Rabbi Chanina, Torah scholars increase peace in the world. V'chol banaich limudei Hashem, v'rav shlom banaich, and all of your children will be students of God, and your children will enjoy peace. And then it goes on to say, Al tikrei banaich ela bonaich. Don't read banaich, your children, rather bonaich, your builders. In other words, God's builders will enjoy peace. not God's children, God's builders, will have abundant peace. Phil, my friend, you were one of God's builders. And because you were such a grand builder, you have finally earned Rav Shalom, abundant peace. I was privileged to build with Phil. 6 years ago, we dreamed together about building a religious school curriculum for Jewish children around the country. We dreamed of building the materials and the resources which would guarantee that our children and grandchildren would have a professional, robust, and thorough curriculum. We dreamed with Richard, and we dreamed with Gail and with Karen, and we dreamed with Phil's grandchildren in mind, with Marissa and Brad and Ilana at every moment. We dreamed that large and small synagogues alike, regardless of who their teachers were or what their budget looked like, would be able to inculcate a love of Israel, an embrace of Torah, a passion for mitzvot, and a grounding in history. Because of you, Phil, because of your generosity and your perseverance and your uncompromising commitment to excellence, we built that future. The Beverly Goldstick curriculum for 21st century Jewish learning is over 2,000 pages of daily lessons, complete with clear learning outcomes, a library of resources, and accessible coaching for synagogue administrators and educators. Phil, you did all this building in honor of your beloved Beverly. Her name is now known from coast to coast by Jewish children and their teachers. You built that. The Beverly Goldstick curriculum is taught in Atlanta, Georgia, and Denver, Colorado, in Greenville, South Carolina, and in El Paso, Texas, in Madison, Wisconsin, and in Potomac, Maryland, and right here in Chicago. You built that, Phil. And what's more, only a few months ago, Phil, you called me and you said, how can we do more? How can we make sure this curriculum is updated and relevant and vibrant? You always pushed for the best. Thanks to your vision and your generosity, we now have the means to update and revise the curriculum every year for the next 10 years. Today is Sunday, which means there's a little boy in Sunday school in Charlotte, North Carolina, and a little girl at religious school in Princeton, New Jersey, who are learning Torah from the Beverly Goldstick curriculum at this very moment. They are learning what you built, Phil. I miss you, buddy. I'll miss your questions and your smile and your tears. Every time you spoke about your family, there were tears of joy and pride. And I'll miss your partnership and your friendship, the way you pushed me to be better and bigger than I thought I could be. But I'll remember you, and we all will. After all, the Talmud teaches, V'chol banaich limodei Adonai v'rav shalom banaich. All your children will be students of God, and your children will know peace. Al tikrei banaich ela bonaich. Don't read children, read builders. Phil Goldstick was a boneh, one of those builders. You built a better world than you found. Phil, I wish you Rav Shalom, abundant peace, You deserve it, man. Zichrono livracha. His memory is a blessing.
We call on Rabbi Baruch Hertz of B'nai Ruvain congregation, the Dean of Chabad in Chicago.
Thank you, Rabbi Siegel. Rabbis, hope you, I'm not sure how many more rabbis here. I know. But Phil was someone greater than life. And everyone in the room has stories and a lot to say. I would like to share just a few personal memories of Phil. Mr. Phillip Goldstick. Number one, my younger years in the rabbinate, I worked together with Rabbi Schusterman. Rabbi Schusterman spoke so highly of the family, Phil, Beverly, the whole mishpacha, the grandchildren. I remember that he was involved in the funerals and many of the families' simchas and funerals. And he always, I'm not saying this lightly, spoke about the family with such reverence and such awe as real mention. And I remember one time when I first came, this goes back to 30 years ago, the way how he spoke and he described Phil and Beverly, I was really dying to meet who is this person. Someone special and significant. My later years, I got to know Phil, and I want to note that Beverly, but I want to especially note the time that closer to the end of Beverly's life. I never seen, sometimes you see over the years in the rabbinate, you see care and concern, you see love, you see shalom bayit, but you see it at a point, at a breaking point. There was such concern and so much love and so much dedication. It was just amazing. It was such an inspiration and a lesson to me and Chani, my wife, what it means, a love, a marriage of love, life, closer to the end of life and afterlife. That's my second memory. Third memory, sitting in my house, Yom Tov, Shabbat, Phil, Gail, Ilana, the grandchildren, couple generations. Phil loved his family. And love is a very general used word sometimes, which is like love. Love meant he cared about every detail, every story. I'm not going to elaborate, trust me, but there's a lot of things I could say. And a lot of you could say how he really, details meant to him something. He loved people. And it was a special love to the family. And he just cared with advice, with a smile, and with encouragement. My fourth memory is going out more than one time for lunch with Phil, giving me advice. And I'm talking, he was a man of advice. Phil knew how to say things properly. But it wasn't the advice. It was the way that Phil lived. I never ever believed that it'll ever end. At age 90, he had the energy, and you have the energy and strength of someone who was 50 or 40 or even younger. And that was to me what Phil was. The way, the passion. Phil passed away 93 years old. There's a very famous leader in Jewish history, one of the early Rishonim called the Rif, the Rabbi of Fez, who is known to be one of the whole halacha, Jewish law, is built on those teachings. To Phil, 93, it was interesting that he passed away at 93 years of age. Now, what people did not know was that at age 80, he became the Rabbi of Fez. And he's called the Rabbi of Fez. When he was 80 years old, he said, I may look 80, but I will celebrate my bar mitzvah with the same energy as a bar mitzvah boy. I noticed, specifically, I'm talking about the last 13 years of Phil's life, and obviously it's many years more. He has such young and passion. Every day was meaningful. Every day had value. Every encounter meant something. He was always, I mentioned before, the rabbi is bigger than life, 100%, but also lived life. Life was so precious, was so special, was so important. In the Chabad calendar, which I know that has been special to Phil's life, is yesterday was 85 years ago, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory took leadership. And he started with the very famous words, a Hasidic discourse which begins, I came to my garden. It's a verse in Songs of Songs. And what was the punchline of the message? The world is a garden. The world is beautiful. Don't look at the world as turmoil. Don't look at the world as horrors, but see it as a beautiful garden and fruits you can enjoy and have. To Phil, life was a garden. He saw the goodness every single day in life. He saw what life meant, together with his Eshet Chayil, Beverly, together with his wonderful daughter, his grandchildren. It was something special. I know that Gail, part of her your life continued on, whether it was in the Chabad, whether it was in the shuls, and in our personal case, the Chabad of Lakeview with David Kotlarski. It was all part of one enjoyable moment. It was all one part of life. And I want to say I am sure that everybody in this room has a speech for half an hour. I don't doubt it, because Phil was so involved with so many people. He had so many details. I'm just sitting next to dear friends of mine, the Finkels, who I know at 1966, the year I was born, Norman came as a young child and held the gavel in Phil's office, which later gave him the energy to become a lawyer one day. And the stories are endless. We will miss you. I will miss personally us, and we will miss all the beautiful encounters, all the life experience. I never thought we'd ever stand in this day, at this moment. But I'm sure from Shemayim up high, you will pray for your wonderful family. You will pray for Gail, Karen, and the whole mishpacha, the children, the grandchildren, for only blessings. And I want to give a special bracha to the family. The family should only have, I know this was important to you, true, your accomplishments are huge, your successes are huge, but I know your continuity, your legacy is your family. And I want to give a special blessing to your family should have health, happiness, only simchas, only goodness, only joy, and maybe merit. Unfortunately, we're still in a time that we see people so dear and are precious to us are depart, but we will merit the coming of Mashiach. Ubila hamoas hanetzach u'mocha Hashem dima ma'al kol panim.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's our honor to call upon Richard Herman, Professor Emeritus of Mathematics at the University of Illinois and a past chancellor. But on this day, most importantly, a true friend to Phil and a partner in their work at the University of Illinois.
I couldn't quite vault over the couch. So it's, so last night, Maria and I were at dinner with Lee and John Loyley, and first thing Lee said was, Phil would be happy to see us here. And I think that's part of what's been said today. Well, here we are, Phil. Look out and see the people from so many walks of life and reflect on what you and Beverly have nurtured. Look out and see the many whom you shared your friendship and wisdom with, the many you loved and are here to express their love of you right back. You practically live by the imperative to welcome the stranger. More properly, you engaged with everyone, often, very often, sharing stories. And I realized after the talk that there were a few stories I didn't know. We met, my first trip to campus in October of 1998. My then wife Susan and Phil's wife Beverly, and that began a wonderful relationship. And there were a few repeat stories, but only when you showed off your Rose Bowl ring, or on the golf course when you hit a great chip and told all that you learned that from Johnny Revolta. And despite your love of golf, we often had to remind you, lovingly of course, to play instead of sharing yet another story. But it was all about people. I feel extremely fortunate to have gotten to know your wonderful family and grateful for the fact that when I met Maria, all welcomed her into the circle, the larger mishpacha. Welcome the stranger. My strong feeling is that you made us all feel special. I know that I did, whether it was our phone conversations, which always had a laugh, no matter what the topic, or going to shul together, naps included. Michael never said a thing, but I'm sure he observed. Certainly our regular games of golf, hearing tales of your time in the legislature, recalling Adlai Stevenson Jr. and Al the Pal, or just simply riding by a building and having you say, that's where my first office was. This was the story about being across from the police station and how he got business very easily. Huh? It was a special pleasure to see your devotion to the university and its students as one of the early contributors to what is now a flourishing program in Jewish culture and society. Your support of Jewish and campus life for students, and certainly your support of athletics. To all this, we must assuredly add your long service with the U of I Foundation. Lee remarked to me about Phil's long service that when Phil spoke, the room became silent as people listened. And I see a few friends from our economist class here who can probably verify that when Phil spoke, we all listened. I recall when Chabad honored you early on, one of the folks suggested that you'd be happy to get 100 attendees. I think the number was 325, Rabbi? I know you said in classic modesty that you didn't need to be honored. I guess there was a difference of opinion. You have been an alumnus of the University of Illinois, second to none, and someone who lived every moment to the fullest, almost living in between the seconds of your life. The last 24 hours, which some touched on, are instructive. In the midst of difficult health decisions, debating that he had to make, you hosted a personal dinner for Brooke Elliott. I don't know whether Brooke is here, but some people are from the new dean of the business school, debating about attending the next day's cocktail party, which I did go to, and Brooke was absolutely amazed at what had taken place. Just before that, I saw Phil and his very special assistant, Mark, at the hospital. As I walked in, Phil was rifling through papers and putting them back in a FedEx folder. Not one to sit idly. The doctors came in offering various options, and Phil responded very positively with, "I'll do whatever it takes to go on." No doubt it was that love of life and the presence of Mark and Pat that got him through previous setbacks. As I left, he quietly said to me, "I love you." This is exactly how I felt about him. He was the older and wiser brother that I never had. On reading through some of the comments on news of his demise, I can only conclude that he taught many of us. I count myself fortunate to have known him, and no doubt there will be many moments when I quietly wonder, how would Phil handle this? So as we mourn, let us celebrate his life. Thank you. It's less than a half hour.
It'll be our honor to hear from some family members, but before we do so, we'll hear a piece of the Alter Rebbe's Nigun, which Alana suggested. This is a melody that's often played at weddings. So as it is played, I would suggest that you reflect on the marriage. I ask that you reflect on the marriage of Beverly and Phil. Well, we may have to imagine it instead of hearing it. So I'm going to continue by inviting, there we go. It's my honor to call upon not two sons-in-law, but two sons in love, Dr. Harry Cohn and Alan Zellinger.
I think most of you know me. I'm Harry Cohen. I'm very privileged to call myself a son-in-law in the family, married to my beautiful wife, Gail. I wanted to share some stories about Phil, many of which maybe you know, but I love these stories, so I wanted to share them with you. So I met Phil a little more than 20 years ago at a very elaborate party. It was the party where I met my beautiful wife, but I also met my wonderful future father-in-law. And I will tell you, he's some dancer. watching him on the dance floor, dancing with his beautiful daughter Gail, and on other future occasions, dancing with his other beautiful daughter Karen and his wife Beverly. He was some dancer. It was mentioned that Phil was an expert on PMA. Phil was an expert on PMA. PMA is positive mental attitude. You may think that the term came from W. Clement Stone, a very well-known businessman in Chicago, but it really came from Phil. Clement just sort of copied Phil. So Phil did many things in his life that I heard about. I wasn't there to see them. So when he was a young man in the Army, an officer in the Army, he was stationed a distance away from Beverly. And Beverly thought, well, it would be much better if you were stationed closer to me. And Phil thought that was a good idea. And he found out who he had to talk to. Well, he had to talk to a general in the Pentagon in Washington, that Pentagon, to see if he could make an arrangement. And he did. He walked into the Pentagon. He asked where that general was. He went into the office. The general was sitting, so I'm told, in a chair with his feet up on the desk reading a newspaper. And Phil said, "Are you General so-and-so?" And the person said, "Yes." "Well, I'm Phil Goldstick, and I came here to talk to you." Well, the long and the short of it is Phil was successful. The general reversed the orders and reassigned him to a new place that was more to Phil and Beverly's liking. I don't think it hurt that the general was a football fan and knew that Phil was on a championship Rose Bowl team for the University of Illinois. Subsequently, as Rabbi mentioned, Phil was asked to run for the state legislature in Illinois by Richard J. Daley. He did. He won. He served with distinction, and he was many times on the tarmac greeting President Kennedy when he came to visit Chicago as one of the dignitaries from Chicago. Beyond those things, Phil was a very successful businessman. I didn't see these things myself, but I heard about them. So you may know, or maybe you don't, that he is a movie producer. The film Dirty Dancing wouldn't have come to fruition if it weren't for Phil Goldstick. The little store in Chicago called the Ralph Lauren Polo Store wouldn't have come to fruition if Phil Goldstick wasn't the developer to make it happen. I was lucky to have I would say my last lesson from my father-in-law, Phil, in PMA in our phone conversation that we shared last Tuesday night. It is true that he was just released from the hospital that day. I don't think he was feeling the best. He had entertained dignitaries from the University of Illinois, but he was still positive, and he gave me more life lessons in PMA, and for that I'll forever be grateful.
Hello, everybody. Alan Zellinger. Harry, great words. As you know, Harry's a cardiologist and I'm a cardiologist. And we always get along because he takes care of the left ventricle and I take care of the right ventricle. So we can never argue. But I want to thank everybody for being here and for these amazing words that have already been spoken. It's hard for me to say anything more. I'm always learning more about my father-in-law, even though I've known him for over 40 years. And it's really hard to say anything about this man that just passed away. You could apply so many superlatives to him. He carried such a gravitas about him. But the one consistent statement, you've heard it today already so many, maybe more than once, that I hear from people who know him well, was that he was larger than life. I mean, that is really an awesome thing to say about any individually. And I totally agree. True, he was tall. I was always looking up. He's a good-looking guy. He was strong, smart, energetic. But really, I was asking myself, what is the secret ingredient that made so many people regard him as larger than life? That's really the way he was. And in point of fact, he was really like a Jewish John Wayne, only not a factitious movie character, but a real-life, outstanding lawyer, businessman, humanitarian, husband, parent, grandparent. But there was something special that made him really larger than life. So over the more than 4 decades I knew him as son-in-law, I always called him Dad, and I came to the conclusion that it boiled down to 3 simple letters that you've heard so many times today: PMA, positive mental attitude. And early on in his career, Phil did become associated and a friend of the famous Chicago businessman and writer, W. Clement Stone. And Phil shared with Clement Stone that difficulty, that struggle early on, financially, hard childhood. They both had in common selling newspapers to make extra money on the side. But W. Clement Stone came to develop an amazing business life and successful insurance company. He authored many books, including the best-selling book, which was Success Through Positive Mental Attitude. And I think it was Phil's attraction to Stone's philosophy that really motivated him to live by that credo, and it was really his moniker, PMA. If you think about Phil, it's all about PMA. He approached every task, whether it was in sport, professional life, family, in a positive manner, and it never wavered. If achieving a goal required 100% effort, he gave it 110%. Applying that secret ingredient of positive mental attitude helped him overcome the many challenges and bumps along the road that he had in life to become so successful. And I really think that that's an important part of the legacy that he leaves all of us. Whatever God-given talents we may have to achieve success at goals, we should always apply that positive mental attitude and give 110% effort like he did. That was the special sauce that made Phil larger than life, in my opinion, and may his memory be a blessing.
Thank you, Alan. It's our honor to hear from Alon and Brad.
I think the first thing I want to do is just, there's so many things to say about Papa that I think the main thing is that stands out to me is how much of a devoted person he was. Everything that he put his mind to, his family, whatever aspirations he had, whatever he was doing, he was devoted and gave, like you said, 110%, maybe even 1,000%, whatever number we can't even end it. And, you know, Papa was very devoted to Nana. He would tell me, I remember him saying, you know, he didn't want to live in a world without Nana in it. He shared that with me. And I know that Nana felt the same way about him. And I think we all should aspire to seeing people the way he saw people. Every interaction he had with those he came into contact with, he remembered the details. He wanted to know, when you spoke with him, he would bring up, the next time he saw you, he would bring up those details, ask you, how is that going? We spoke about that last time. How how is that going? How can I help? Like we said, he was a problem solver, making sure that if he could be helpful, that he wanted to do that. He's was always there for me. I knew that he was always there for me. He made sure to tell me. That was another thing that he took, like, every minute, every second was precious. So if he felt about you that he loved you, he would say that. And he wanted to know, I guess I would say when I would say to him, I love you back, that was so important to him, for him to share his feelings with you, with me, with whoever he was speaking with, and then for you to share your feelings back. He really cared. He cared deeply about people and about human connection. I have obviously so many memories. I'm not going to go into detail, obviously, but just off the top of my head, memories here in Chicago with Nana and Papa, always making sure that if there was a grandparents' day, if there was an event at Anshe Emet growing up, figure skating, recitals, different events that were going on, he was there. I knew that him and Nana were going to be there supporting me. He's always there for my children. He had a light in his eyes when he would see my children and spend time with them. And when he was in town, every Sunday, he knew that he was going to spend time with the children. We all looked forward to it. He looked forward to it. My children looked forward to spending time with Papa, as they say, Papa Phil. And I always just felt that he had my back. He would share his opinion on what he thought about different situations. If he didn't agree with you, he would tell you, and he was a genuine person, not just trying to say whatever would make you happy. He would make sure that you felt supported and that you knew that he would give his positive input on how he could help you. I'm not going to go more into PMA, but I will say that I find that in general, I'm a very optimistic person, thank God, and I think that I owe a lot of that to growing up around him and my other family members who have been affected by his devotion to the idea of PMA, and that it's the recipe for success. He was always clear that his family and that one's family is number one. Whatever it was he was doing in his life, it was for his family. He would never do anything that was not for the betterment of the world and for his family. I have memories playing golf together, him letting me drive the golf cart a little bit when I was very young, and Brad, we would drive the golf cart together. And don't tell anyone, I don't know if we're allowed to do that. And with my children, like I said, he was just so involved. And really, not only was, he wanted to be a positive influence on those around him, on my children, on his great-grandchildren, but he succeeded in that, which is a credence to him and how he lived his life. He would play board games with my children, reading, golf. My children go to golf every Tuesday, and we think about him often, for sure on Tuesdays. He would come to the golf lessons one or two times to make sure that they were taken care of. They had the golf clubs they needed, that he could help them with their swing. And I think, like I was saying, about how it was important for him to say the words "I love you" or to those he cared about and loved. He was just connected, and it's important. I think that what we can learn from it is important for us to never wait. If you have the opportunity to do something, or if you need to tell someone something important, just do it. He did. He never stopped and thought, should I tell someone that I love them? No, he just did it. So I think that we should always share our feelings and our thoughts and our positive energies with those around us. And I think he wanted to leave a legacy, and he definitely left a lasting, positive, beautiful legacy, and we will miss him so much.
Hello. I'm Brad. I'm Phil's grandson, Brad. You might notice I'm wearing some Illini today. It was important to me to do that. I'll probably keep this in my lapel for a long time. But we are gathered here today to celebrate the remarkable life of Phil, a man who touched each of our lives in profound ways. I know I speak for many when I say I was incredibly close to him, and the loss I feel is immense. But with the sadness, I'm filled with gratitude for the time we shared and the invaluable lessons he imparted. I have over 70 voicemails from Phil still in my phone. After Nana passed, I started saving them, a small treasure trove of his voice, his energy, and love. Listening to them now brings both tears and smiles, a reminder of the constant support he offered. Phil was always wanting to help. He used his life experience, his wisdom, and his vast network to assist in any way he could. If you mentioned a challenge, he'd be thinking about it for weeks, sending texts and emails at all hours with ideas, solutions, and connections. As I scrolled through my texts with him this week, I saw some advice he sent at 3:45 in the morning. He cared deeply about me, my career, my happiness, and my success. He helped me through career turning points, even lending me his car after I quit my job in New York and moved back to Chicago. I remember a brief period when I considered a career in mining, of all things. And he happened to be playing golf with someone in the industry, got his business card, took a photo of it, texted it to me, and urged me to connect ASAP. That was Phil, always thinking, always connecting, always helping. Phil taught me the importance of a good handshake from an early age. Look someone in the eye, give a firm handshake, not a dead fish, as he'd say, and introduce yourself. He introduced me to countless people, and every single one would tell me what an incredible man he was and how proud he was of me. He taught me to seek advice from those who are motivated and in your corner. Family was paramount to Phil. He was a constant and reliable presence in my life. His love of Nana was immeasurable. He'd say that when God created Nana, he threw out the mold. He would tell me about visiting her in his dreams after she passed, finding joy in those reunions. I remember the day she took her last breath, the nurse confirming her passing, and the devastation in his eyes. He missed her tremendously and longed for companionship again, never quite finding it. He had a unique and loving way with Marissa. Her biggest smiles and laughs were always with Papa. Who's my honey, he would wait for Marissa to say, and he'd follow with a heartfelt, I love you, and Marissa would get a sound from Marissa. He supported his brother, always striving to positively influence his quality of life as well. Phil's passion for golf was infectious, and it was my favorite activity as a kid because of him. He had a photogenic memory of every hole he played, who he played with, and how they shot the ball. He'd remember the club I used on a specific hole years later, which I had no recollection. He even got me custom cut clubs when I was 3. He introduced so many of us to golf. Nana, me, his daughters, Mark, Sue, Sorella, and his great-grandchildren. He'd say the ball gets in the way of a good swing, highlighting how practice and effort on the front end would lead to good outcomes. That's what I took from that. Even during the early pandemic, when I was hunkered down, worried about COVID, I wasn't leaving my home, he went to a store to get new clubs made. I was worried he was going to catch COVID out, So he just loved the game, and as was mentioned, he had 8 holes in ones. So if family was number 1 and golf was number 2, when you combined family with golf, that was like his nirvana. So I think that's why he did that. Phil's love for the University of Illinois was unwavering. Nearly every picture I have of him, he's wearing something orange. And so that's why I am today. He instilled in me the importance of giving back, and his philanthropic efforts, especially his tireless work for Rett syndrome fundraising and the University of Illinois College of Education, were inspiring. He didn't just wear the colors, he lived the values of the university: service, leadership, and a commitment to making a difference, and he instilled those values into me. He was always thinking of others, always making connections. Even at 92, he embarked on a jam-packed Florida tour with Mark Sue, a road trip along the coast, visiting all the friends and contacts he had from all the different places. And it culminated in Miami to visit Patty and me for 3 days together. And just the way that he planned that trip, squeezing every opportunity in to connect with people he valued, and then dedicating those precious, 3 days with us at the end, that was Phil in a nutshell. That was the kind of man he was. Phil's memory was incredible. His name recall was astonishing, and driving through Chicago with him was a history lesson. He had a story behind every building, every intersection. If I mentioned traveling somewhere, he'd immediately connect me with someone I had to meet there. I told him I was going to Disney World. He was like, go meet so-and-so. I want you to have breakfast with them. And he'd arrange for that to happen. He attended my soccer games, shared bedtime stories when we visited Florida on vacations, where I'd gleefully kill off all the characters, and that always made me feel loved and supported. I remember being worried about his reaction to me going to Michigan instead of Illinois. He was, quote, disappointed, he admitted, but I knew he came around as he witnessed my happiness and celebrated my successes. Looking back at emails from college, he'd sign them, Nana and I love you and will always be there for you. I admired Phil. I literally looked up to him as a child, thinking I'd be as tall. I sadly didn't get there. My interest in investing and business came from him, and he helped develop my understanding of those topics. I followed in his footsteps and became an Eagle Scout. He set an example for philanthropy, family focus, and entrepreneurial spirit. Phil's support of individuals with special needs and his contribution to the study of communication disorders, which has been in place for 20 plus years, really impacted me, and I feel like the work that I do today was really part of that foundation. Phil taught me so much: the importance of hobbies, the power of laughter, and infusing levity, as he'd call it, into situations. His Berwyn jokes, the kind that were so unfunny, they were funny, will live on. And the difference between learning in school and applying it in life, the importance of lifelong learning. He embraced technology, always learning new things. Even I didn't know how to do some of the things he did. And he even read the first and last chapters of a book called Radical Candor, gave me a copy, and urged me to read it. I found it so powerful that I bought copies for my entire company and gave it to them. And that's the kind of influence he had, always pushing me to be better, to learn more, to lead with empathy. His positive mental attitude was infectious. He taught me to never give up, to never stop going, and he never fully retired. He was even working on deals with a real estate attorney that we both used just days ago. It was reported to me. He taught me to have no fear, to seize the day, and to always have something to look forward to. My wedding, his 94th birthday party, which we had all bought tickets to Arizona to see, a trip to Florida, the next round of golf. He was always planning, always looking ahead. Even recently bought a tuxedo for my wedding 6+ months in advance. One of the last things he said to me was, before you know it, you'll be here in March. Time flies, referring to his 94th birthday party. Above all, Phil taught me the importance of family, the unconditional love, the shared meals, the constant support. He taught me, without saying so, that a measure of success is what your children and grandchildren think of you. Do they love you? Do they want to spend time with you? He taught me to take care of my health, to invest in my community, to nurture relationships, and to always have quality time with loved ones. Phil embodied a positive mental attitude. He squeezed every drop of joy from each moment, yet always had something exciting on the horizon. He treated everyone with kindness and respect, from Marissa to his wonderful caregivers, remembering names, asking about families. He showed me the power of perseverance. He came from humble beginnings and achieved so much through sheer hard work and determination. He had a saying, "Channeled effort pays off." He taught me to face challenges head on and to always move forward. Setbacks, he'd brush them off, declaring, "That's history," and reminding me to keep my PMA strong. He'd emphasize that you don't want to say, "if I would have only," in the future. Avoid regret by taking action. Don't wait till tomorrow what you can do today, he'd urge, a constant reminder to seize every opportunity. He lived that philosophy. Even in recent years, I saw how many people looked up to him as a model for living a full, joyful, and impactful life. He was fun, energetic, and always making things happen. He wasn't just living life, he was attacking it with a smile. Phil, Grandpa, Papa, PCG, you were an inspiration to us all. Your love, your laughter, your wisdom, and your unwavering spirit will be deeply missed, but your influence lives on in each of us. We carry your lessons, your values, and your love in our hearts. We are all better for having known you. Rest in peace.
Finally, it's our honor to hear from Gail and Karen.
I feel like the luckiest girl to have had my father, who he was, as mine. We had a very close relationship, and we would talk almost every day for the past several years. He was always there for me and my family, no matter what. I just wish we could have had a bit more time, but I'm thankful for his long life and the time that we did have. He made each and every day count. He was so looking forward to his own 94th birthday celebration, planning a party in Arizona with family and friends, and most of all, to be at Brad and Patty's upcoming wedding in June. He bought a new tuxedo, as you heard, and it was all set. He always preached to do things today instead of waiting till tomorrow. That was his famous motto. The outpouring of love and admiration for my dad has been overwhelming but not surprising. There has always been acknowledgement of his accomplishments, good deeds, and respectful conduct that he possessed by those who knew him. He had many lifelong friends that he cherished and made efforts to stay connected to by telephone calls, texting, sending annual holiday cards, attending and supporting events that were meaningful to each friend. As a grandfather, he again was always there and available to my children by attending games, events, coming to our home most Sunday nights for dinner after he and my mom were playing golf in the summers. They loved being with us and creating lasting memories together. My dad has always been the one who's been able to get Marissa to respond the most. He would stand in front of her and sing her name in a familiar song and ask her if she was okay. She always smiled and would respond vocally and get a big reaction to him every single time. He also solicited his friends to support RSRT, the Rett syndrome organization that we as a family have supported to help find a cure for Rett syndrome, the disorder that Marissa endures. He was passionate to make a difference for her and all the others who are affected by Rett, and we're so proud that he championed this effort so successfully. He offered Brad lots of support and love, and as Brad got older, offers to connect him, the consummate networker, to those who could potentially be helpful in the future. He enacted many teachable moments, and I believe that he influenced Brad to go into business and pursue finance in college. And as you heard, he didn't choose U of I, even though Dad brought him to Illini games, visited the President's Box, and introduced him to those of influence. Brad chose the University of Michigan and asked Papa if he was upset when he didn't choose U of I. Papa said, "No, I'm disappointed, not mad." And Dad wouldn't miss Brad's graduation from Harvard Business School, and that trip was quite remarkable. Their deep bond developed further over the past many years, and Papa was a confidant, mentor, and all-around tremendous positive influence. Mark, Sue, and Pat are the best people and caregivers, offered Dad an extremely high-quality lifestyle that he enjoyed fully each and every day. He made each day count to the fullest extent, and he even put in a putting green in Arizona last spring in the backyard so he could enjoy the sport fully right outside the doorway. Sorella lived with our family for 15 years and to mainly help us to enable Marissa to have the highest quality life in our home. She spent a great deal of time with both Marissa and Brad, and her relationships with both are extremely special. She continues to be a part of our family, and we love her and her family, Sarah Lita and Victor. Sarah Lita grew to know my dad during her weekly visits, and Dad would make an effort to offer teachable moments, and he cared deeply to impart and share his wisdom with her and actually all people that he came in contact with. Every relationship was cultivated and strived to be maintained. Dad, you have been a remarkable man in so many ways. You have left your mark on many. We cherish and miss you. You are deep in our hearts forever, and you're now going to be reunited together with Mom. Rest in peace.
Dad, this is my love letter to you. Your life is your legacy. I was the lucky one to spend last week with you in Arizona. Your tenacity to live and find joy in planning your upcoming 94th birthday. What a joy to watch you plan and look forward to another celebration of life. You have touched my life in every way and every day. As I reflect, one of the first lessons you taught me, always protect your name. Your reputation will follow you forever. Never, ever forget who you are. My moral compass was influenced at a young age by your example with strong identity and empathy for others. The many lives you have touched along your journey have sounded out your enormous capacity to share your values, respect, encouragement, achievement, compassion, and extraordinary teaching moments as a husband, a leader, a scholar, a team player, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, a friend, and my father. You were a social and relational person drawing in long-term relationships. You never forgot the details and to make others feel good and special. You were a visionary who knew the value of listening closely to your clients, your friends, and your family. There are a few quotes that inspire me when I think of you, Dad. The first one's by Maya Angelou. I have learned that people will forget what you said. People will never forget how you made them feel. The other quote is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The only person you are determined to become is the person you decide to be. Life is not measured in the breath we take. It's the moments that take our breath away. Dad, you always took my breath away. I love you forever.
This has been an extraordinary funeral, a service of remembrance. I don't remember a service quite like it. In a very real way, this service is an answer to a question. What impact did Phil Goldstick's life have on this world? The answer was contained in the tributes by rabbis, school chancellor, and family members. It was immense. Phil, your life was a blessing, and all of us were privileged to be blessed by your presence. We rise now for the memorial prayer. El male rachamim, shochem bamromim, hamsei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina, b'malot kedoshim atorim, kazrakia mazhirim en nishmat, Fishel Tzvi ben Yaakov Shmuel shalach lo lamo. Began Eden tehei menuchatam barachamim astireh b'setek and fechel olamim. Utzor b'tzrachayim nishmato Adonai unachalato v'yanuch b'shalom al mishkavo. V'nomar Amen. God, you are exalted and full of compassion. We pray that you take the precious soul of Phillip C. Goldstick under the wings of your divine presence. We ask you, God, to remember the many worthy and good deeds that Phil performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. May Phil rest b'shalom. May he rest in peace. And to that we can all say, Amen.
Interment will take place at Jewish Waldheim Cemetery, located at 1700 South Harlem Avenue in North Riverside, about an hour drive in procession from the chapel. For those of you who will be joining the family in the procession, we ask you to please keep your bright headlights on and your emergency flashers on at all times and stay as close to the car in front of you as safety will permit in order to avoid gaps in the procession, as large gaps in the procession can be dangerous, especially at intersections. The family will be observing Shiva at the Goldstick residence at 1555 North Astor Street, Unit 29, today and until 8 p.m., with a minyan at 7 p.m. Parking is available in the building. Then they will be observing Shiva at the Zellinger residence at 1374 Meadow Lane in Deerfield, Monday from 1 to 4, and then resume from 6 to 9 p.m. And the police did ask for the cars to park on one side of the street. Wednesday from 5 to 8, the family will be observing Shiva at the Luz residence at 2657 West Coyle in Chicago. The following persons have been selected as pallbearers: Alan Zellinger, Brad Zellinger, Harry Cohn, William Cohn, Corey Schiff, Joseph Weil, and Stephen Levin. Honorary pallbearers: Richard Herman and Avram Fagel. We ask you to please rise at this time as the pallbearers whose names I've called step forward. And we're listening to Aveinu Malkeinu as we escort the casket from the chapel.